If you've shared a loaf of bread, you've experienced an even greater joy. The phrase breaking bread is rooted in the Bible. Bread that was too stiff to tear was broken and shared. And like a dove with an olive branch, the gift of bread has evolved to symbolize the physical and spiritual coming together of people. The Guild is honored to partner tonight with the Artisan Grain Collaborative to salute all of those who exemplify the generosity of bread. Tonight's panelists represent the work so many of you are doing in your own communities. Author, grain activist, and flour ambassador, Amy Halloran will introduce our panelists and moderate the discussion. We will end with a question and answer session. Amy, take it away.
Thanks, Mitch. I really, really wish we could be together, but this is a pretty good second or third. I'll take it. I will take it. Thank you, everybody, for coming to this event. I've been thinking about the generosity of flour in particular over this past year. Everyone grew captivated by the way that flour could swell and fill our houses in an empty spot in our lives. Well, it's been filling an empty spot in my life for quite a while now. But it was really nice to see programs evolve, such as the Neighbor Loaves program, which the Artisan Grain Collaborative started. Artisan Grain Collaborative is a group in the Midwest. We're a network of all the people in the grain chain, and our fearless and wonderful director, Alyssa Hartman, had a great idea of how to protect all of our great small businesses in the grain chain during the pandemic. And she came up with an idea of a neighbor loaf, which would be purchased at a bakery for donation to a food pantry. And in this way, this bread that's made with at least 50% and very often much more local grain would secure the entire supply chain and take care of the sudden need that food pantries were experiencing as the patterns of shopping shifted so dramatically, and as and really secure bakeries as their wholesale lives were torn right out from under them. So I'm really grateful that Mitch took the bait when I said I wanted to have a talk about the generosity of bread and how it's been exploited and serves us in this particular year. We have a slew of some of my favorite baking people from around the country. I'm gonna introduce people in a clockwise way and then let everybody introduce themselves a little bit thoroughly to tell the story of the programs that they're engaged in. But I'm just gonna name everybody so you get to know them a little bit first. Catherine Curley is in Washington State, and she organized a tremendous program called Community Loaves, which works like Neighbor Loaves, except it's made in homes. People bake 4 loaves at a time, and they give it away. I said I was going to let her talk for herself, but I can't help it. And then Michelle Huggins is a part of the AGC. She's in Granite Falls, Minnesota, and she's a cottage baker. I'm so excited that Michelle is going to talk about her participation in the Neighbor Loaves program and her thoughts on everything bread. Scott Mangold is at Bread Farm in Washington and also in Washington State. And I'm very fond of Bread Farm, so I think you will be too when he tells us about the Adopt a Loaf program. And Nate's over in St. Paul and delivering bread by bike. And he's going to talk about how the giveaway breads fit into their buying. Nate's also a member of the Artisan Grain Collaborative. And then Alex, I can't say your last name, so I'm not gonna say it because the Zoom says it right at the bottom. And so Alex is with Lost Bread in Philadelphia, and I feel a great kinship with Lost Bread because it's a milling bakery, and there's just something really special about everything they've done. Well, they make zines, so I'm completely enchanted to have a print form with all their bread works. And Alex is going to talk about getting into some donation boxes. So we have before us this great Hollywood squares, no, Bread Bakers Guild squares of people to discuss this concept and practice of bread as a generous thing. And that does not just mean donations. Of course, donations are great, but the bread can solidify these systems that we have. These small scale bread enterprises can be bridges into other networks that are not having access to fresh food. And we're going to talk all about this. I'm going to turn it over now to Catherine first. Catherine, please tell us more about Community Loaves.
Thank you, Amy. By the way, you can speak as long as you want. It's just lovely to have your enthusiasm and your leadership in this as a flour ambassador, as a grain ambassador, enthusiast. I share your love of grain and bread. I am categorically a serious home baker, and my journey into this well began really only about 6 years ago, but it's a deep well, and I'm not drowning in it, but I am fully in, understanding the richness that we have in Washington State, developing my own bread craft, enjoying all the people that I get to meet along this incredible journey ever since the bread bug bit. So, Community Loaves came out of sort of a universal collision of a multiple things. And I'd love to share that with you. Is there a way for me to actually share my screen?
I think Rebecca can make
do that. Okay,
yes.
I'll do that.
Oh,
okay.
Beautiful.
All right, so I'll tell you just a little bit about Community Loaves and its genesis and where we're at today. So Community Loaves is, as Amy said, different from Neighbor Loaves in that this is home-based quarantine bakers baking out of their home kitchens and donating those loaves through a relay race, if you will, into our food banks. And how it started was that because I told you already that I had been bit by this bread bug about 6 years ago. And my own bread journey, my love of baking bread, my visits to the grain gathering, and then my connection with the Cascadia Grains regional conference and participating with them introduced me to so many lovely, lovely people that I also, I wanted more of that connection. And I created a group here in the Northwest called the Northwest Bread Bakers. And we would gather to meet farmers, to go on field tours, to bake and break, Mitch, bread together, to learn. And those events were workshops and intensives and social. And we had about 500 or so members in that group. On one Cascadia Grains conference, and I would attend the Cascadia Grains regional calls as sort of a leader of this Northwest bread baking group. And it was really a year ago, close to a year ago today, not quite today, that I heard about Neighbor Loaves. And I was like, that's good. Of course, I don't have a bakery, right? But I have all these people who have homes and kitchens. And I thought, and if you flashback to the climate back March, we were all just devastated and struck by the cost of this pandemic. I was the dean at the time of the Seattle Culinary Academy, which has professional technical programs. My people were losing jobs right and left, and they needed those part-time jobs. The hospitality sector was gutted. So the climate was really pretty bleak. I'm listening to the news, watching the news, I'm researching hunger, and hunger is not new, right? But the exacerbation of the pandemic causing first-time families to have to visit food banks was new, right? And this really struck at my heart. I was canceling events for Northwest Bread Bakers because we had a full calendar of things that we were doing, April, May, June, July. And when I heard on that regional call, this Neighbor Loves concept, I thought, I wonder if this affiliate group, I wonder what we could do. How could we help? Is there a way that this organization I've got created could be organized in a way to help? A little research suggested that the answer was yes. The Department of Health in the state of Washington says that baked goods that do not require refrigeration can be received by donors, can be received from donors. Well, that meant that there was we didn't have to have cottage licensed kitchens, and we didn't have to work out of a commercial kitchen space. We could operate and make bread and donate it. That said, food banks in general do not want 50, 60, 70, however many good, well-intentioned home bakers dropping off their rolls, pumpkin loaf, chocolate chip cookies. They're not labeled. They're not, they don't look all the same. They're not really set up for that small individual contribution. What and I knew this. I knew this in advance. I knew this from the talks that I've had with Dr. Jones about giving food into the food system and the work that he had done with his approachable loaf. I already knew that as part of the fabric and part of what we did at the college program that I have. So I said to the food banks, if we did this, if it was just a large donation, an individual, one person driving by and dropping them off, would that work? And they would all be packaged the same, and they would all have an ingredient label. And they said, sure, we'd give it a try. Actually, one person, one phone call, one food bank said yes, and we were off. That was it. That was the universe saying, you can do this. If I had made the call to a different food bank, it could have been no, and I might have gone, oh, okay, that's not such a good idea. We're not going to do that, right? But it wasn't. It just all lined up. It went from Neighbor Loaves to a phone call to the Department of Health to the King County's public health supervisor, just to make sure I had all my ducks in a row. And every step in the way, it was like the universe said, you guys could have done this all along, right? My first donation was 19 loaves. So pretty tiny, 19 loaves. It was 5 bakers. We spent about 4 weeks working on our bread formula. We were serious about it. I mean, I say we're serious at the home bakers. I mean, we're serious. We're checking out the hydration and what about this and the oatmeal porridge, and is it too wet? Is it too sticky? Will other bakers be able to do it? Is it, does it have to have the sourdough? Do we need yeast? How much? Blah, blah, blah. We started with one formula that's now called the Classic, and we now have 3 formulas. So we're an equal leavening opportunity. So bakers who don't want to deal with sourdough don't have to. We've now made 28 total donations, 18,800 loaves of bread, about 18 tons. We have 850 volunteer bakers, drivers, packers in our network. We source the flour intentionally here and we're right here in the Washington. We've got 2 great mills And so we get that through Cairn Springs and Fairhaven. So just another graphic, I'm not going to bore you with that. The loaf, I said we patterned it initially. We took influence from wherever we could borrow, and then we made our loaf. So the approachable loaf, in terms of its penchant for whole grains. I am very much interested in public health, and I wanted this loaf to have a very high percentage of whole grains. Whole grains and local, that's win-win. It needs to be a sandwich loaf because it needs to be approachable, familiar. Our thick artisan boules, not everybody's going to be able to cut into. Not everybody is going to be able to know what to do with it. So it needed to be a sandwich loaf. Our grains all come, like I said, from Fairhaven and Cairn Spring. Flour matters. I mentioned already we had 3 formulas. All of our bakers, all our volunteers attend an information session. You can't participate in the program without having attended an information session. It's actually about an hour. You're not getting that talk. But in that hour, they get presented, Scott, you'll like this, with an understanding of why flour has flavor and nutrition and why we choose the flours that we do. Okay, so it's part of the breaducation moment. And this is to any well-intentioned baker, from novice to professional. And we do have some professional bakers in our network who've made incredible donations. Josh Grunig of Zilberstein's is a regular donor in the area of 50 to 80 loaves per donation cycle of a honey oat pan loaf. These are all pan loaves, and they're like 9 by 5 pans. Our formula, we tell people, or inform them, you have to sign our terms and agreements that you'll have best safety practices, you'll wear a hat, you'll put your hair back, you'll no hand contact with the loaves after they've baked. I already mentioned 3 formulas. You can do this loaf, and whether you have a KitchenAid or you're going to hand mix, and we have videos and tutorials for every step of the way to help ensure their success. This is how it works in the very, very high level. Volunteer learns about this program from a friend, a news article, a TV spot, whatever. They learn about it. They sign up for an information session. They then decide whether or not this is something they want to do. If it's something they want to do, they create a volunteer profile at our website. And in that process, they select their geographic hub, which is probably just a block down the street or, within a mile of them, because we have 43 geographic hubs. They watch the videos and they practice their bake because they can download the formulas. They practice. They order their supplies. We have a monthly flour truck. In fact, I just got off the truck to come and spend time with you. This is flour truck delivery week. We take all of the supply orders out to the hubs, and the hubs gather and pick up their flour supplies. And in addition to the supplies for the loaf itself, we're supporting bakers and baker education, and they can choose the Fairhaven double O flour or the Edison all-purpose or the Skagit 1109, so we supply these things that they wouldn't necessarily have access to normally, because it's the purview of bakers. Anyway, they get their supplies, they make their bread, and they take that bread to the hub. Oh, I gotta move you. Hold on one second. They take that bread to their geographic hub on the 1st and 3rd Sunday of the month. It's always the 1st and 3rd Sunday of the month. So we have a donation coming up on Easter Sunday. And In addition to the bread, on Easter Sunday, our bakers, to stretch their wings, keep the project fresh, are getting the opportunity to donate hot cross buns as well. And participation is always optional. It is something that they are encouraged to enter into joyfully. There's no hard, fast commitment. They just choose. And if they do want to donate, they check in the loaves. So we have a counter, and we know how many loaves are going into the food bank. And I think that's it. That's how it works, Amy. And I hope I did that in the 7 to 10 minutes. I'm not confident.
I have no idea, but it was great. You covered everything we needed to hear, except and one little question I'm going to ask is, who pays for the flour? Do the donors buy their flour?
They do. So this is 100% a volunteer effort, and it's their time, it's their craft and heart, and it's their money buying those ingredients. But we make those ingredients available at a price point that is better than retail. So, but a little bit more than wholesale. And that is how we've been able to have a few dollars that allow us to make, to build a website. When we first started, it was 19 loaves in a bag. There was no website. It was all Google Forms and, lots of craziness. And there's still craziness, but now we've got a website.
That's wonderful. I really adore it all. Thank you so much. We're going to take more questions later on, but I want to move on to Michelle Huggins from Dope Creations. Hi, Michelle.
Hi, I hope everyone's doing well. Good evening, and thanks for having me, Amy and Catherine.
Joining.
That was really informative. Thank you. It's given me ideas and something to aspire to. That's really amazing. Thank you for what you're doing. I just want to start this by saying, feeling kind of raw right now. I've been watching the Derek Chauvin trial for the last 3 days here. So it's kind of just opening up some of those wounds here of police brutality. And I want to just take a breath for George Floyd as he cannot. Thanks. Dope Creations is me. A founder's story I always say is hard to come by because I didn't find it, it kind of found me. I was never a baker. I kind of loathed it before. I didn't like being so technical. I'm the kind of cook who does a dash here because I feel like it and it's my business, like Tabitha Brown says. But not like having a kitchen scale and, having weights and being intentional about where I'm sourcing my ingredients from. But I did stumble into natural fermentation on the drink side with kombucha is where I got my start. And it was just really fascinating that these things have been around since the beginning of time and how people kind of just used what they had and were just able to make amazing and healthful things with it. So I just kept going with that. Ginger bug, kefir, milk and water. And just kind of little science experiments in my basement, and a starter formed. And I got into bread baking and I loved it. I was giving it away. I was freezing it. I was putting it under the bed, it seemed, because I just had so much, right? So I just felt that maybe I should have that go on a larger scale and share this goodness with everyone. So just to backtrack a little bit, I reside in Granite Falls, Minnesota. It's about 150 miles outside of the Twin Cities west. Our town has one stoplight and about 2,700 people who use it. So, fairly small scale. But still, we're a developing community and we appreciate the land that we live on and try and use our resources as, we can't just say, oh, I want Indian food tonight and be able to make that happen unless you're cooking it yourself. So in this bread baking, I just researched my local farmers who was selling grain, what types, how far off was it from what I was using, currently buying online, just figuring out different hydration levels and if that would work for me. So I was starting to come across wheat berries, and I was kind of just sprouting them and seeing what happened, putting them in shakes, just doing different things with them and not having a grinder yet. So I was gifted kind of like just a high-speed blender that I was trying to mill, because it's not really milling, the grains in. And, you have to start somewhere, right? So, I was doing that for a while and was just realizing that I was kind of abusing the grains and not using them to their full potential. So, just with this, it's always a learning process along the way. So I did invest in, a stone mill to begin just a stone mill. Catherine, is that you again?
Yes, I'm so sorry. I spilled my water. I had to get a towel. I hid my self-view so that you wouldn't see the chaos. I can't find my mute button. I'm a mess.
I enjoy the break.
I am so sorry, Michelle.
You are fine. You are fine. And we all will be, right? So it's stone milling the grains. And it's interesting because it's kind of just been instilled in me about the importance of breaking bread together. I'm the youngest of 3 girls. So, no matter what happened during the day with us disagreeing about watching soap operas versus game shows, at the end of the day, we break bread together at the table, and we kind of just fuel up and sustain our lives as a unit, as a family. So it's just interesting that break bread together. I have that on my business card too, just how that's kind of stuck with me like along the way. So, now tying it back to neighbor loaves, the pandemic started, and I think neighbor loaves came a few months after that. And just the pandemic kind of forced me to pause and be a little bit more intentional. So I would start my day by, kind of just looking out the window at my neighbors' houses, and just wondering, how are they actually doing? Are my older neighbors sustaining themselves? What's happening behind closed doors? And then I get this email about neighbor loaves, and I was like, that's it. That's how I can still be part of this community. And also kind of get my brand out there and teach people the importance of having these nutritious grains, right? Because I think one of the stipulations is you have to use 50%. I think I use like 75 to 80, but 50% of grains. So I utilize grain from A-Frame Farm in Minnesota, Luke and Allie Peterson. I also get grain from Askagard Organic Farm and Ben Pinner Organic Farm. So it's just great to be able to use these organic natural resources here within Minnesota, and also how that spread, because once I started donating these neighbor loaves and putting it on my site that you could donate, it started getting national attention. So people are saying, oh, well, you sell flour too, right? So now these Minnesota farms are going all over the map. And it kind of was helpful too that there was a flour shortage at the time, right? So people were looking for other ways to obtain flour. So it was good to get those on the map. But anyways, just noticing too that my postal carrier was just delivering so many more packages and everything. So I thought, let's also take this outside of delivering to my local food bank weekly and start giving those, to people's mailboxes, or to just drop a couple off at the post office. I'm at the library, people who are still having to, give service during this time. So as of this morning, because I delivered a dozen this week, Dope Creations has donated 418 artisan bowls that I slice and label each week. And I did that with these 2 hands. So that just goes to show you, just a home baker can also be part of this program, and just give what they can. Anything that you can do is always appreciated. So I'll just pause there. Thank you.
Thanks, Michelle. That's so great. And I love the specific shape you're describing that yours took. And before we move on to Scott, I just wanted to highlight that you don't always get the donations to make those dozen a week, but you have you've made a commitment to do a dozen a week, whether you have the financial support for that, right?
Absolutely. You know, and that just goes to show, as I forgot to mention it, that it's not even in my mind anymore. It's on my site. There's no pressure. It just incorporated into my normal bacon each week. So, you know, Monday night I get the process started, and then by Wednesday morning I've got them all shaped and ready to go. And yeah, it's just what I do. It's what I've been doing. And if I can't, that's okay too. And I've had to come to terms with that.
Thanks, Michelle. And thanks very much for starting your section off with a moment for George Floyd. That's really important. Thank you. Okay, Scott.
Yeah.
You're up. Please tell us about how your donation program fits into everything else that you do at the bread farm.
Well, I want to first start by saying, kind of springboarding off of one thing Michelle said right at the end, was that she just fitted into what she does normally, and it's not that much pressure. And that's an important part of, I think, what we did too. And I think, you know, I'm hoping that there's a bunch of people watching this and listening that are they're thinking about how they might approach something like this. And we really thought hard about how we can make it just a natural part of the same systems we already had in place, because we were already kind of burdened by having to readjust all of our systems to accommodate the changes that were kind of forced upon us by, I'm not going to say it because I'm sick of hearing about it. So we also got this infamous email about neighbor loaves, and it landed in my inbox, and I read it, and I was like, oh, this is what Amy's doing now, and it was really great. And then a couple of weeks later, we had a local farmer from our area, actually from the Midwest, he was a retired farmer here, approach us and say, I'm used to being able to help my community by providing food, and I can't do that right now because I don't have land to grow food on, and I'm new to the area, and I want to figure out, and I love your bakery and I love your mission, and I just want to figure out if there's a way that I can maybe provide some backbone of finance to have you guys bake loaves that can then get to people that need them. And we've always delivered our day olds to the food banks and tried to support with donations, community events where people were really in need. And so this, you know, kind of tailored really well for us. But one of the stipulations he put on it, and we kind of put on ourselves at the same time, was to create something that would perpetuate. So to not just take his money, make the bread and drop it off, but to make something that would stimulate other people to contribute. And so, you know, I probably just straight out stole the neighbor loaves idea and renamed it, but that was intentional in the fact that we weren't going to be living up to the local flour stipulations, right? So we do use local flours, but we're not at the levels. And for me at the time, it was important to kind of keep things as simple as possible. And so we already had bread formulas that we were making that were tested and proven and tried and true. And so we could just overlay the Adopt a Loaf program onto our systems. And so this donor said, I will support donations. We donate to the food bank, one specific local food bank that is a hub distributor to other smaller food banks. And we also deliver to our local school district, and they put together boxes, a weekly box of a week worth of lunches for the students that aren't going to school, and then they have drop sites where the families can come and pick up their weekly box every week. And that went on all through the summer too. So donor has the money, and we launched the program. We put it out on our website and on our social media, and the first night, and we put the loaves. One was a artisan loaf for the food bank. One was a sliced loaf for the schools. Put them on our website and kind of launched with a little bit of a media flair, but not a lot. And that first night, my wife Renee held up her phone to me with the analytics of the web sales. in the first, like before 11 o'clock at night, I think we launched at 5. We had probably 5,000 loaves of bread that had been purchased, and like literally it was out of our minds, crazy. And so what that told us was that there's all these people out there that want to help, but they don't have an avenue to help. And we laid an avenue out in front of them, and they got on it. And it hasn't really stopped. It slowed down from that first night. It hasn't really stopped. And so, you know, success, right? Win-win. We were in a position as a business of just like Amy was saying, we lost a ton of clientele. We had scared staff. We had to shrink the quantity of staff we could have in our building and make fewer things. You know, I was analyzing our expenses and our sales on a daily basis, just to make sure that we weren't going to go backwards and just, you know, die a slow death. And so it was scary times. And so this provided a lot of security for us. And so it was a win for us as a business, because we had this trickle of income, right? It started was this influx of income, and then it was a trickle of income. And it just helped us to know that we were going to be able to keep going. So it was a win for the bakery. It was a win for these people in our community that wanted to find ways to contribute and to help our neighbors in need. And so they had this instant avenue, and we still have, I have a handful of people, you see the same order come through every single week, 12 loaves on Sunday of this same person. And so they just have made it a part of their deal too. So we're making the same loaves that we made. We didn't have to make any changes there. We already have a function of how to order loaves. And in this case, we just let the ordered loaves build up, and we made the bread 3 days a week. So we'd have, okay, we're going to make 100 loaves to deliver 3 days a week, Monday, Wednesday, Friday. And as soon as we run out of the funds from the donators, then we'll just have to slow that down and do it on a different scale. And so we were sending loaves out 3 days a week all through the summer, and then we hit a stopping point, and now we're kind of back to about 40 loaves a week right now. I have some sales numbers. I was going to so I guess kind of like sales numbers, but I wanted to also mention that we set the price of the loaf at a more reasonable cost. So we're kind of like splitting things both ways. And then we also did a baker's dozen deal. So every 12 loaves that are donated, the bakery is going to kick one in, and so on their own. So that's another great benefit. So since last year, I think this started the first week of April for us. And so in the 11 months that we've been doing this, we have created 5,168 loaves of bread and donated them, kind of at a value for a business of $27,000. And so that was a nice little boost, right? That helped to sustain us too. And then it helped the original farmer to feel like he'd participated in something that helped the whole community. So it's just like, everything about it was wonderful, and it wasn't hard. Like that was the thing that we didn't need hard. We didn't need difficult at that time. And Catherine, you created something amazing, but it sounds like a lot of work. And I'm glad that you have the energy and the enthusiasm to do that, because it's remarkable. I don't think that there's anyone else doing what you're doing. I just honestly don't. And so that's remarkable, but we couldn't hack that. So we did it our way. And this is where we ended up. And I think that's about all I have on that. I'm going to be short so others can go long.
That's great, Scott. Thank you so much. And I just like the name of your program. I'm going to say it again, Adopt a Loaf. And stealing was what we meant to have happen when the AGC put out our model. We wanted it to multiply totally.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm so glad it's taken off.
Yep.
Thanks. So Nate, it's your turn. Please tell us about what's been going on with donations in your bakery.
All right. Well, thanks for having me. This is really great. I'm learning so much. Also, I'll apologize. I'm in the bakery at the end of the day, and I forget how many fans go off and on. And you know, all the refrigeration and everything. So if it gets like super noisy, I can go down to the basement. It's just not as cool. Yeah, so I'm Nate. I'm in St. Paul, Minnesota. And if you don't know where that is, it's 150 miles east of Granite Falls. So, and you all know where Granite Falls is. So that's your point of reference now of Minnesota. Two things that have stood out that I want to comment on what Scott was saying about how this can fit into what you're already doing, that it doesn't have to be more, it can be something that happens. And also like that bread connects us. And at the level of moving beyond just bread and into the grain community, like it's so cool because Michelle and I are using the same grain and the same farmers. We get grain from Asgard and from A-Frame Farms and Luke Peterson. And so it's just like, someone now who I've only known through Instagram and now get to be on a panel with, like, you know, like we're making the same bread from the same dirt, from, you know, and I just think that's amazing that there's a level of connection that's deeper than any of us will ever really understand with the bread and how it connects people. And I think that moves into like how bakers and bakeries are conduits of connection. And so, so we're Break Bread, spelled B-R-A-K-E, like putting on the brakes, doing things the slow way. So we do naturally leavened bread and deliver by bike. It's the slow way. It's also not the most profitable way. So before you do anything, talk to me along our business model. But we started a loaf share program called the Loaf Share, kind of a bread it forward about three or 4 years ago. And it started out in our retail. You could buy a loaf share, and I found one of our old ones is just a piece of paper that says, good for one free loaf of bread, Break Bread. And so you could buy one of those and then we'd clip it up by the register. And then you could come in, and if you didn't have cash on you, you could grab one of those and hand it to us, no questions asked. Or sometimes people are buying bread and then they'd use one of those too to get an extra loaf to give to a neighbor. And it was a pretty cool program, and it also was a way for us. We would, you know, sometimes have an excess of those, and then someone would have a fundraiser going on, and they need 10 loaves of bread. And we would use those to offset the donations. And so with the pandemic, we shut down. We've always had a subscription part of our business. So we've had a retail, but then we've also had like you sign up and get fresh bread delivered to your home by bicycle. And so that's kind of been around for about 7 years. Our retail started 5 years ago. And then a year ago, we closed the retail, went back to all subscription. And so with that, that's when our loaf share program kind of switched a bit, and it turned into more of a if you were a subscriber, you could add it to your order. You could add a loaf share, or even a recurring order, like once a month. We have a number of people that do it once a month, donate $5 towards loaf shares. And then what we do is we just track what's coming in, and then bake extra every day. And then we have a group of retirees that do the distribution for us. And so how, like going off of like how Michelle's just added it into her bake, and Scott saying that this doesn't have to be something new. For us, when we moved to subscription only, we no longer had the retail to absorb our overages that we would bake. And so we would, you know, you're baking 30 loaves of something, you bake 32 or 34, and you have those 4 left over. Without the retail, those are just on our shelves. So what we can do now, because we have a pretty controlled, our numbers are much more controlled than in a retail environment, is that we can actually donate fresh bread daily. And so the first bake that comes out, we can start pulling for donations right away. So we used to do our, day olds were donated. Now now loaf shares are covering the cost of fresh bread going out, which is really unique for a lot of kitchens that we, kitchens and food shelves that we work with. They're used to like how to make old bread taste fresh, and now they're like, wow, this is still warm or whatever, And so it's been a really cool change and a opportunity for us. And so ours is so that's kind of the how of it. Yeah, people pay it forward, and then we bake it, and then we're just the conduit, and the group of retirees take it out. And then on Saturdays, what we do is we do a share table in front of our shop, and so there's just we just line up the free bread out front, and so that's more direct to our neighbors. I think one of the cool things about it is that it gives people an opportunity to connect. Like, we're the conduit, they want to give, we'll say yes, give, and we'll turn it into bread, but also they want to support small businesses and bakeries. And so when all of us were facing changes in our business models, this isn't necessarily a sacrifice on our part. This is, oh, you're buying bread and we're just giving it away. Like, and I think that's it. I think that's huge to think about, and important to think about, is that it's not necessarily a sacrifice. It's supporting small businesses. It's making sure that especially when we're dealing with the local grain economy, like, this is making sure that the farmers are selling their wheat. This is making sure that we're paying our employees, and that our neighbors are getting fed. So that's kind of a nutshell of what we do and how we do it here. That's the loaf share. Yeah.
That's great, Nate. Thank you. And I had a nice segue to Alex right after Nate, but I forget what my segue was. So we'll just have to, well, I think maybe I was thinking about how bakeries are conduits, Nate. I think that's a really great, I wrote it down in my notebook, expect more of, as I seal those words and use them again and again. But when we first asked Alex to be a part of this Generosity of Bread talk, Alex misunderstood me and thought that it was all about just donating. It was all about donations. He said, but I didn't do donations. I'm not very generous. I'm generous in that I'm sorry, Alex, I'm going to talk about you as if you're not here. But you said, I'm generous as a business owner because I want all my employees to have good wages and good work lives. And I said, no. This is about the generosity of bread as a supportive mesh for these businesses and the whole entire grain chain. And you certainly exemplified that. So will you please tell us about how your involvement with I don't know if we can call it donation, however you're going to describe it.
Yeah, I did. I didn't fully misunderstand, but I was feeling, when you asked me to participate, I was feeling particularly ungenerous in a lot of ways. And I think like this past year has just been a perfect storm of really, really hard things for obviously for everyone, but it felt like, I still feel completely drained and numb. And I find, I think people who know me can see it on my face of like smiling a lot less laughter. So I don't feel warm and generous at this point compared to any other times in my life. And so that was kind of the rationale behind being like, no, I don't. But I do think that what everyone has spoken to, generosity takes a lot of different forms, and I view it as, I think even talking to you, actually, thank you, Amy, helped me kind of resituate some things in my mind of like the idea of embedding care and generosity and warmth and things like that into like structurally into systems, as opposed to in other ways. And so I think that in those areas, like I can look back on how our business operated during the pandemic and mostly take pride in that. And I think that's really important. So basically we were all set to kind of shut down completely. We had furloughed some employees. We lost a big chunk of our business between farmers markets shutting down and wholesale shutting down and everything. And we were approached by a local, the local wing of a rather large but kind of regionally focused food distributor to provide food boxes for the city of New York during the pandemic. It kind of meant like we were going to have to sell bread at pretty much close to break even for us. And so there was actually, when they approached us initially, there was some kind of hesitancy over, like at that point, even it already felt like the right course of action, or maybe the safe thing to do would just be to, for the sake of everyone's health and well-being, would just be to kind of, shut things down and turtle up, like just stay home. But around the same time, I think they were already really, it was really clear already that food insecurity was just getting so much worse so quickly, and for such a normally secure population. And this is the same time when we were getting calls from grocery stores that all of a sudden they couldn't stock their shelves with national chain breads, or there were delays, or the supply chain was totally fucked basically. And so we decided to participate in this idea, with the idea that we would be selling, I think they quoted us at 1,000 loaves a week. And we opted to go for it because we were also like, well, I think if there aren't that many bakeries in the area that I feel like can operate at a certain scale, but also who are really interested in and like prideful of the local food system and how it really confident that it can provide for people in terms of like quality, quantity, all those things. And so we were like, all right, we have to do this because we think that, if someone else does this, it's just going to be, commodity flour and whatever. And it won't really, like, this is an opportunity for us to put our true ideology to the test, and all the stuff that we've been boring people about at parties about, why we make bread a certain way. It's a chance to put it to the test. So we did that. And then within a few weeks, it just kept scaling up at, a really shocking pace. So it doubled right away a week later. By the time the contract had been secured with the city of New York to give these distribution boxes to the citizens there, it had doubled in scale. And so that was great. So we were like, oh, wow, suddenly there's actually a little bit of, it's not just at cost at that point. We have the economy of scale. So we can hire some of our bakers back. And by the time it started, a few weeks later, it had already doubled again. So it's up to 4,000 loaves a week. And then at a pace of about every week and a half or 2 weeks, it continued to double until we ended up at 13,000 loaves a week baked for those distribution boxes. And that lasted for a total at that pace of a little bit more than 3 months, I think. And at a smaller rate afterwards. So for maybe 6 months we were baking for this program, and it was great in a lot of ways. Like it was, we were able to bring all of our bakers back, provide hazard pay for a chunk of it across the board, and hire a bunch of new people, at least with understanding that it would be a seasonal thing for most of them. And it also, like, we could put those kind of local food chain things to the test that we were really prideful about. And, granted, we're a small company, so we were able to be sufficiently nimble when we couldn't get in, Danko rye for, 3 weeks or something like that. We can use another rye or substitute something else. So there was just some, adjustment of formulas that had to happen on an ongoing basis. And when you're mixing, extremely large quantities of doughs anyways, you have to be pretty vigilant because the stakes are so high if you screw up a massive batch of dough. So it felt, that's something we could do. And it really, it worked, honestly. It actually, we initially started with loaves that were going to be half whole grain and half roller milled. We were going to use central milling organic. And we still believe we've been using organic grain, and ever since I learned about Roundup being used in the hardening off process for grain, it's been impossible for me to use non-organic large scale wheat, even if like the profit margins and the price is just so much better that it's really, it's one of those things where you're like, oh man, if only I could do this, but I couldn't do that. We, working with our local grain suppliers, and who also do some of the milling for us, the remainder we mill in-house on our stone mill. We were actually able to kind of switch over entirely. It was the impetus to switch all of our flour purchases over to the regional millers, Small Valley Milling, which is 100 and some miles away from us in Western Pennsylvania. We're in Philadelphia, and that's something that we've continued since then. Like all the roller milled flour we use, we get from them. I like to think that it will benefit them eventually, because it's the amount of grain that we purchased from them certainly benefited, but also I think their existing flour blends were not. I don't think they weren't formulated by a baker. They were formulated by a farmer, and so we discovered when we were able to work with them to kind of custom mill a flour blend of 85% winter wheat and 15% spring wheat, that we got flour it's the best roller milled flour that we've ever used. So that was a good lasting effect. They also, were able to purchase a new grain silo for storage based on the purchases from these programs, which they told us they named it the Lost Bread Silo, which is very sweet of them. So it was really, our loaves were, I think, virtually the same as a lot of other participants. They were a little bit enriched with the local oil for shelf life. They're mostly sourdough, the least for consistency, half whole grain. The goal was to have something that the whole distribution process at that scale has a lot of like embedded delays. So it's in some ways, like, Nate, what you described of kind of fresh bread going out to food kitchens versus day old is such a thing that we have not come close to figuring out how to solve on our end, and is such a important thing, because there is such a big difference between something that's just still warm and even something designed for shelf life that's gets to the recipient after 4 or 5 days. So it was an interesting process to have to kind of design the formulas not only to come out of the bakery feasibly with, it's not a huge scale bakery, and still be pleasurable 4 or 5 days down the line and fit all these other parameters. So we learned a lot from that experience. But I think it was, for me, like I said, again, like I have not felt like a generous person in a long time, but I do look at this as like some of the net effects, and I think by embedding a generous ideology into all the actions that we did, being able to sell the bread at cost, deciding and sticking to formulating it a certain way, committing to paying a baker a certain amount, which in our case is, a minimum wage of 15, no matter what you do in the bakery, and then paying hazard pay. Those all those things I think are become line items in a budget that really they really decrease the profitability of the bakery in many ways. But in other ways, like we have staff that have stuck through us from the beginning. We're 4 years old at this point, and we have staff who've been with us for 4 years who are super dedicated and competent, and a core group of really skilled bakers who've done that. So I take a lot of solace in that end of things, and I do think that like the act of kind of baking and providing a nutritious loaf, not just like a easy soft white enriched sweet roll that everyone is kind of will universally enjoy and definitely feeds the soul, but not really the body. I think there's a lot to be said for kind of putting love into the process of those more like holistic options. So I mean, that was our experience. We got to the point, I guess, to wrap this up in a fun and interesting way. At some point, we decided to stop hoard because it was really a lot of scale for us to handle in our facility. At every turn, there's like a new logistical challenge, and we had to get some new equipment, and we had to wait for it, and supply chains are all screwed up, and it was all, at times it felt very ungenerous, like we were subjecting some people to really long hours, and we roped in a crew of all of our friends to help pack the first day, and it was just, we were all packing until 6 a.m. and it was all a mess. But there, at some point we decided that the return on investment, was no longer worth it for us. But so we looped another bakery, the only other bakery that we could think of that would we would be able to kind of hit the same metrics of like local sourcing and other things. For them, I think they were already operating at a larger scale, but they had obviously been adversely affected by the pandemic. But I think they had a similar, I'm kicking myself for not asking him to join, but they had a pretty similar experience from the whole side of things, where that, there is the opportunity to even kind of benefit as a business, because we came out of it with some profit and having scaled up our equipment considerably and having provided those decent jobs and hazard pay. I think there's still the opportunity for all of that in just deciding how you orient things. And anyways, this bakery, who's a good friend of mine, owns it. I've actually been baking my bread at their facility the past week at nights because our oven is down, which is something they used to do in our bakery back in the day. So there's like I do think there's something you said for just the inherent generosity of the process. And I can also imagine a lot of other circumstances where one of your closest competitors in the same region, if it weren't a bunch of bread bakers, they might call the cops on you if you tried to come work out of their facility for a week or so. So that's happening ongoing right now. We're actually just got fixed today, so we're back baking at home. But anyways, that's all I have. So thanks for inviting me, Amy.
Thank you, Alex. I love knowing all of these details, and I love seeing, because we only have 5 bakers here, well, 6 programs here, but look at all the different shapes that they've taken, and all the shapes that they can take. I'm interested, now that we've gone around and there's been a little bit of piggybacking comments on each other, I'd like to go back to the beginning of the circle and see, Catherine, what have you learned? What have you learned here? What are you thinking about now that you know of these other opportunities?
Oh, so many things. One, that Scott's right. It is, but I was sensitive, and I was talking with this crew of people before our panel discussion here, that we are not a professional baker. We are people who love bread, right? And our contribution to the narrative, to the grain economy, is to be smart consumers, and to be selective in our ingredients. And so, and people do gravitate towards bread. It is comforting. It's therapeutic on so many levels. It's tactile. It makes your home smell lovely. It's something you can give from your heart. And you all know this because you're in this industry. It's why you're there. It's why you're doing that. And when you layer on a smart selection of grain, supporting local farmers, increasing that nutrition value, you're nurturing yet on another level. And when you add supporting other people, as you are through the boxes and help, we're creating connection. So what I've learned is this, and what I was surprised by, and why, Scott, it is actually a crazy level of effort, but so satisfying and fulfilling at the same time, is that we are all hungry for the same thing, purpose and connection. And in the time of pandemic, I don't know if community loaves will be evergreen or not. And maybe I care on one level, but on another level, I don't care. Because for the last year, we've had purpose and connection and done something that provided a validation of a human sort of condition and need. And yep, it was just a loaf of bread, but it was more than just a loaf of bread at the same time. Right? It was far more meaningful. So what I've learned is that common thread, whether you support your local baker, which you should do with the purchase of a neighbor loaf, or adopt a loaf, or whatever we call it, we want to do that. And a smart consumer, so if you think of me as part of that chain, a smart baker, home baker, one who understands the value of ingredients and the process, will support a local baker's products more intuitively than one who doesn't really, who's just a commodity loaf purchaser, going for the $2.50 loaf as opposed to the thoughtful fermentation that Michelle has put in. So one of the things that I've learned is that we're all doing the same thing in creating a connection and an opportunity. As Scott said, people want to help, and they want to do so. If you provide the avenue, that they'll show up.
Yeah, those words really ring so true. I wore my hewn bread, my favorite sweatshirt. They were one of the first neighbor loaves bakers, and their customers were starved for doing something. They wanted to help the bakery, and they wanted to help others. Same as the farmer who initiated your program, Scott. Scott, do you have anything to add after hearing from other people?
I don't think I have anything to add, but I think that, a couple of things resonated with me, and the same as you, when Nate was talking about that conduit of connection that a bakery kind of holds in the community. And it's a responsibility that you have as a bakery owner. And I think that we've heard from all of us that we honor that. And thinking about kind of the depth of those connections, just like halfway under your breath, Nate, you said, to the dirt, right? And it's to the dirt, right? It's it's all the way the other direction too, and we're right in the middle. And so we do reach out to a lot of people, and we consumers pay attention to us because there's joy in bakeries, and there's comfort in bakeries, and there's all of these things. So we have a platform to begin with, to, you know, like you were saying, Alex, where it was an opportunity for us to kind of test our ideology, and to make sure that we were sound in our beliefs and our thinking, of what, you know, and what that thinking, where that thinking brought your bakery. And so, you know, we're benefiting people in need, and we're benefiting each other, and we're benefiting our community, and we're benefiting the ground, and we're benefiting the farmers, and you know, it might be some work, right? And it might be break even, but we still do it. And I think that's what I'm taking away.
That's great. Thanks, Scott. Michelle, do you have something to add? Any reflections?
What has already been said is really resonating with me. All of that, you know, 10 times. I feel it. I needed this self-care through giving and community. And that's really what drives me. And it may seem selfish, but in doing it to help others, I think that's a selfishness that I don't mind hanging on to. Kind of just like putting love into the loaves as well. You know, you walk around seeing everyone masked, but I know that when I go into my food bank, you know, there's a smile behind the eyes every time I bring my loaves. So that also makes me feel good. But two, it definitely has been a process, you know, just kind of in making adjustments to how I do things. It's easy to say, you know, I've always done it this way, right? That doesn't necessarily mean it's the right way. So it's kind of also just helped me learn and grow too, just in my process. You know, maybe you can't make a 2-pound bowl each week, right? A dozen of them, at least for me. And my small oven that sometimes is on the fritz too. But, you know, and that's okay. And you make those adjustments. And, you know, I had to get smaller bannetons, and that's just what I did. And it's what I wanted to do. And I don't know, I just love that. I love appreciating the earth and sharing that with others. So that's my feel good.
Thanks, Michelle.
Yeah.
Thanks. Nate, do you have anything to add?
I'm just, yeah, my brain's just like spinning right now. There's just so much to absorb and to digest here. So I'm just grateful for everybody sharing their stories, and also that everybody's coming into this acknowledging. It just makes me grateful to be in a community of bakers, because you've all come here with a really open hearts and honesty about where you're at and what the pandemic has meant and done. I think one of the themes that I'm picking up that is inspiring me is just the subversive nature of bakers. And like Alex was saying, like, in what other business would you like, hey, can I borrow your oven? I know we're in competition with each other, but we're not, you know. And the loaf shares, neighborhood loaves, adopt a loaf, they're all like kind of this they're subversive in that, like, they're taking a capitalist system, and instead of looking at the survival of the fittest, they're lifting up the weakest, and they're doing it within that system. And I just think that's pretty badass. So to be part of a community that celebrates that and looks to lift people up in that way is pretty cool. So yeah, that's what's got me excited from this. Thank you.
That's great. I hope somebody else is taking notes, because I can't catch everything everyone's saying, but luckily we are being recorded, so we will have this. Alex, do you want to say anything else before we open it up for questions?
Yeah. I just, you know, listening to everyone talk at the end has just reminded me of I guess I've had a few memorable, really small moments in my life of just like real pointed generosity and warmth that might have been really small gestures. I remember one of it in particular at a cheese stand at the Union Square Market, as Cato Corners, and just the person working in the food stand there, was just being incredibly warm and generous. But like, I stopped by at a moment when I was feeling a lot of doubt and feeling down and a lot of doubt about like, food production and all these things. And it just like really picked me right back up in a way that I feel like, made me stay on this path to finding my what is really my calling in a lot of ways, or, at least the job that makes sense for me. I'm getting a lot of those same vibes. So like, I'm sure everyone already knows it, but those small gestures of generosity and like somehow the more close the connection to the person is, like the more personal it is. Baking in your home oven is a far cry from like our massive thermal oil oven, and it's very different. But those like more direct connections can have so much impact, and have impacted me personally in so many ways. So I was just feeling those same vibes.
Great. Thank you. So I'm seeing lots of comments from, well, I'm seeing some comments, I can hardly keep up with it, but from people who have projects that are starting, and we'd love to take questions now. In the last few minutes, have any already come up? I'm not reading this very well.
Amy, while you read, can I ask a question? May I ask one?
Please, please.
This is to the entire panel and attendees. Do you think that you'll be able to sustain this once the pandemic is over? Have you thought about this rather than a temporary fix as a long-term solution?
I think I'm hooked. They got me on the board, so I think I kind of have to do it now. But I don't mind.
Board of your food shelf, Michelle? Yeah, okay.
Yes.
Yeah. And Catherine, I think, is sticking with this because you quit your day job, right?
Right. Or I'm finding a new day job, probably in a bakery. But there's the intention, hope, that we can still be of service as an educating body, as a community baking entity into the future, and we're organized for that effort. And we've expanded our operations to include Oregon, and in April, hopefully working with Hillside Grain, Idaho, we'll open up Idaho. So we're hoping to build a support structure that lends itself to other cities, but to be determined, to be determined.
I love that. I love the training that goes into it, and that it's an opportunity to participate in a really really tangible way beyond your kitchen. It's so great. I love it. Scott, do you have any thoughts on perpetuity?
Yeah, no question. We will keep this thing going. So yeah.
Great. Alex?
Yeah, I mean, our contract with the food distribution has ended, but I would love to, like I said, this was kind of proof positive of a lot of our firmly held beliefs that we can like make that, that healthy food is a human right, it should be delicious, and that we can feed ourselves from our surrounding areas. So I think we're poised and interested in doing that as much as we can. And so I have to figure out a way as a, as a business person, owner, and not a baker to make that happen again. Because, we can make good bread and we can handle serious volume thrown at it and some logistical challenges. But on the other hand, like moving beyond that into the sales realm and the broader, larger distribution is like rapidly falling very far away from my skill set and into the territory of like extreme anxiety. So if anyone wants to help us find an outlet for the 13,000 loaves of local whole grain deliciousness, then yes. But if it means finding and getting there ourselves, then it will be a very slow process. But it's good motivation to know that happened and is possible, and that it's really great product in the area, and there's so many wonderful and caring and dedicated people committed to feeding others, not only just feeding others, but with very high quality and appealing food that are out there and that are like in our network and tappable and so on. So
absolutely. Nate, were you gonna add something?
Well, I'm just, it may continue to morph and change, but it'll always, I think, be part of what we do. Yeah, at some level, for sure.
That's great. My big idea is, these things have worked. So we've had different ways that all of this stuff has been paid for, but at the root of it, these small or home bakers have been involved in getting fresh bread into the emergency feeding system. Now, who do I have to talk to at the USDA to convince them that these bakeries, these conduits, especially the ones, all bakeries I love, but I really love the bakeries that are utilizing local grains and making regional grain systems thrive. So how can we get some of those commodity dollars into these community conduits? And how can we, I worked in the emergency feeding system for 6 years, and I got to see the food, the phenomenal flow of food, watching what commodities were suddenly available when we were suddenly at war with China and with trade wars was silly. Like, how come we can't find ways to support regional food systems where the food is right where you are, right where the people who need to eat? If we're not going to have a living wage, and I think that that's not really going to happen in our lifetimes, how about we get an emergency feeding system that is linked to regional agriculture? So that's where I see some kind of potential for. We have proof of concept in all of these things that we can feed people fresh, healthy bread. So if anybody has anyone to talk to me about this great idea, I can fill them in with all your examples.
Well, the great thing too is, Amy, it would also stimulate the local economy.
Totally.
Yeah.
Bakeries, mills, all of these things, they're engines. They are engines for jobs, engines for, solid agriculture. All of this is trade. People are supporting themselves, trade and craft, and I wish we could get it all lined up.
Are there more questions coming in?
I'm
I
not
think
seeing any.
We're
But-
getting a lot of compliments, Scott. Lots
Okay.
of praise and compliments.
Well, because I feel similarly to you, Amy. It's like, how do you make this happen? Like, we spend a lot of time in our groups of bakers and local food wars and all that, just preaching to the choir, talking to each other and throwing around our ideas. But I think that as a putting quotes around this, as an industry, small small, mid-sized scale artisan bakeries that are utilizing local wheat, local grain off the commodity market or partially or however. We're hitting a cusp of we're being noticed. We're being noticed by big food, and we're being noticed by the commodity, and they're a little bit nervous about us. And so I think that we're at the point where we probably finally kind of have enough momentum to have an audience to talk about this outside the broader range. And I know that's what you're trying to achieve, Amy, with the Flour Ambassador and the community grains. And I know that's what Dr. Steve Jones is doing with the Bread Lab and the Approachable Loaf. And I remember being invited to a Puratos event where they were, it was a sales event, right? But it was packaged as kind of a meet the miller event, and it was for Central Milling. I think Nikki Justo was there, and we had to sit before we got to go into like the demo of the bread and stuff like that. We had to sit through a video, and the video was 20 minutes and was put together by a futurologist that they had hired at Puratos to do this global national company, food company. And we're watching the video and learning all about Puratos and the things they do and stuff like this. And he goes, and so then the futurologist is at the end, and she's saying, now what we realized is that the future of bread, and then there's this pause and the last screen comes up on the video, is the past. And it was all about artisan, small scale sourdough stuff. And this is coming from Puratos, the largest baking corporation probably on the planet, looking and saying, we're just realizing that there's something coming and we better be on board with it, right? I mean, they invested, I don't know how many hundreds of thousands of dollars to put that video together and have the events and things like that. And so we have cachet now, and as a group, and these how did you say it, Nate? A little subversive, right? And so this like subversive approach, we need to coalesce. Like we've been hiding out doing our little secret stuff and kind of getting our own little digs in, but we're all on the same page. We're all on the same page, talking about and looking and wanting to do very, very similar things. And how do we, I think the answer to your question, Amy, is like, how do we, and maybe the Guild is a part of this, how do we create the larger group that if you're thinking about, let's go back to you, Michelle, and starting out with George Floyd and the impact that just individual people can make by standing up and saying that this is how it should be is large, and there's more support for it in our country than ever, and there's more support for making bread and food how we make it than ever, and so it's a matter of organizing on some level.
Yeah, it sure is.
We have a question, Amy.
Yeah, can you read that?
Yes, it's from Carmen. How do you stay transparent and open with Adopt a Loaf or Loaf Share programs? So how do you stay transparent while doing that?
I think that's a great question. We don't have a lot of transparency other than I have all the records and can show what was purchased and what we've made. And I've been very careful to make sure that those are exacting because I expect that there will be someone that will want to say, what are you doing? Like, where's all this going? But I haven't ever been asked for that kind of level of transparency.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Yeah, that's the same for us. We document every day how much goes out and what's because everything's ordered online. We do a monthly total of this is how much has come in, and then we document every day what goes out. And no one's actually requested that. But we do have the records so that we can be held accountable. But also, I think some of that. I like to think that, especially as smaller bakeries like we all are, that we've already established the trust that we're not gonna, you're not gonna see pictures of us in Hawaii after like a successful loaf share campaign. So yeah, I think the trust has already been established. But if any of you are going to Hawaii, I'll join you.
We're gonna make neighbor loaves towels. We're gonna get them printed. Everybody's gonna have them on. Because that's the whole reason everybody gets into baking. Travel. Well, to bakeries, right? Yeah, travel to bakeries, bread travel. Anybody else want to add anything about transparency or anything else? We're pretty much at time.
Well, before we run out of time, I just want to thank everyone on the panel, all the attendees, you, Amy, for pulling this together. I know I acknowledged everyone at the beginning, but after listening to you, I'm just so inspired and motivated and sitting in my dark kitchen wondering what I'm going to do.
Well, Mitch, you used to do that peace, love, and bread over at Johnson and Wales.
Yeah,
you know what to
and
do.
we did that with the support of King Arthur Flour, King Arthur Baking Company now, and they donated the flour and the students came in on Saturday and we would make 500 to 700 loaves and take it to distribute it through the community. And we did that at least once a month. Our biggest year was 5,000 loaves.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's great. That's
It's great when people do it on their own time, just like you're doing now. The students were motivated.
Terrific. Well, we have precedent and success and promise for more of this. And I believe that if people who are watching are interested in contacting any of us, we just contact, send something back to the Bread Bakers Guild of America. I was supposed to do a slide with all of our emails, but it's a little too tangible for me to actually do something like that. But I will promise that you can get a hold of everyone through me on social media. I'm the flower ambassador over on Instagram. And I'm just so pleased to have been able to have this conversation. Thank you, Mitch, for having us. Thank you, Catherine, Scott, Michelle, Nate, and Alex for joining. Thanks, Rebecca, for all of the tech support. And I look forward to more talk like
The list
this.
is posted.
Oh,
Rebecca just
good.
posted the list, everyone. So grab that before we leave.
Great. Okay. Well, I don't really want to go. Do you? No. But I guess I'll go finish my peanut butter and jelly toast that's been sitting here. And thank you again, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank
Amy.
you.
Great to meet you all.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone, for your stories.